Almost all of your tasks that you're going to do in Trailblazer begin with a query. What do I mean by that? I'm going to click on voters, and let's say that I want to print a canvassing list. Well, if I'm going to do that, I first need to bring up a list of voters. For my purposes, I'm just going to do a search that's unfiltered. Tells me I've got 77,000 records, and I'm just going to load the top 100, but if I wanted them all, I would click that. But I'll stick with the top 100 for a moment. I'm going to click the wrap button so that the names are not wrapped at the moment. I can always widen that area out. But what would I do with this? Well, at this point, I might write a letter. I might print a walk list. I might send an email. I might export the list. So all of those activities begin with the query. Every one of these links over here on the left-hand side is going to open up a query panel. So if I click on addresses, this opens up a query panel where I can search for houses by a particular district or a particular address and so on. I could do the same thing under the contributions where I might seek out contributions by dates, amounts, who. I can do that from this voter tab here as to who made the contributions. I can also do that from the voters list, but we'll get to that in a few moments. Pledges, everything. So everything begins with a query panel. Now the query panels will look different from one list to another, but they will all function the same way. In other words, you will enter in a particular criteria, and so in my case, I'll put in a note on this one, and I could even say that the note has to be created by a particular person. I'll say this, and I'll run my search, and it'll come back with 150 notes that were created by this person. And again, if I want to click the wrap button and take that and see more data here, I can do that. Now these buttons up here allow me to see more data at a time. That's what the split screen is for both, or I can do a single screen of the data here and can also shrink the menu off to the side there as well. But let's go back to our voter searches. I'm going to first close out these windows. I'll click the close or cancel, whichever menu or whichever button is appropriate in that window. Let's begin with some simple searches. If I wanted to find people by their name, I could type in Smith, and it'll come back and tell me that I've got 507 Smiths. I'm going to reset the query, which removes all previous criteria. And maybe I'll go now to the phone number tab, and I want to find everybody that's got a home phone number in the database. And I'll run that search. It'll come back and tell me I've got 65,000. Now I had 77,000 records, 65,000 of whom have got a home phone number. And again, I can load all or some of those records by just changing that value. Here I've just loaded 100. Let's now combine some of these. Let's go back to my name, and I'll pick up Smith. And I got 507 Smiths in the database, and maybe they've got different states on them. Yep, sure, they do. All right, so let's do this. I'll go back and I'm going to say I want only those Smiths that live in Minnesota. And I'll change this or add in Minnesota in here. 507 becomes 427. I might say I'm looking just for those that have got a phone number. So I will say present. I'll disconnect everything except the home phone and search. 427 becomes 379, which is indicated right here. Your search results number is always listed right here, 379. Let's say that I would also like to find out those folks who have contributed, the Smiths who have contributed. So I'll go over to my Contribute tab, and you notice that it's currently disabled. I'm going to connect this to enable it. And just by connecting it, that says I'm looking for people who have contributed. I haven't specified any particular amounts yet, but I'm now down to 18 Smiths who have contributed, who are from Minnesota, who have a telephone number. And if I said they had to give $100 or more, my list will drop to, actually didn't drop at all. I'll make this 1,000 or more. And it dropped 4 of them off, so I've got 14 now. Let's go back to my demographics under the General tab, so the sub row here under demographics. And let's say that I'm looking for them between the ages of 35 and 55, and I run that search and I get 11. And if I was to add the gender in here of female, I'm down to 3 records. So 3 Smiths who live in Minnesota, females between the ages of 35 and 55 who've contributed $1,000 or more to my campaign. So this is a fairly complex query, probably not one you'll run very often, but these lightning bolts up here are an indication that you are filtering on something on that tab. So if I come back to contribute, the fact that it's plugged in and I've got $1,000 on there is a indication that lightning bolt indicates that I have criteria on that tab. When I click the reset button, all of those go away, and if I run my search, my 77,000 records all return. As I noted a moment ago, I've got about 77,000 records in my database. Let's say that I'm running in a primary election and I need to focus my resources on those people that are likely to vote in that next primary. Well, how do I determine that? One way is by looking at their previous history. So here I'm looking at the voter history tab, and you'll notice that it's all disabled at the moment or dimmed out. This little button right here is the connection button. I'm going to click that, and that now enables that particular panel. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this window out so I can see it a little bit better. So I'm going to hit the show advanced functions here, and there's some more icons that appear, but the one that I'm looking for is the magnifying glass, and that pops this window out so I can see it much better. Now I'd like to select the recent primary elections, and as I'm doing this, you'll notice this counter will change as I check mark each one. Next primary, next one, next one. So I've just selected 5 primaries. I could have selected all 7 if I wanted to. I'll close that window by clicking the red X, and that collapses it back down into here, and I can still see all of those check marked primaries. So I could have done it from this window as well. When I click the search button now, what it tells me is that I've got 17,000 records out of the original 77,000 who have voted in at least one of the last 5 primaries. Useful, my resources are already being conserved, but I'd like to take it a step further, and I'm going to say I'd like those folks to have voted in 3 out of the last 5, not just 1. And when I run that search, my list goes from 17,000 to 5,000. I could take it a step further and add another narrowing condition. If I hover on this little orange icon, it says narrow your search, which I'm going to do. I'm going to click the button, and what it does is it creates another tab. So here I've got vote history, but on this second tab, nothing is filled in yet. So I'm going to come down here and click the primary for 2014 and run my search, and my 5,252 records becomes 3,319. This now becomes my population of records that I'll be working with. Now, again, that took a few keystrokes to get there. If I wanted to save that for reuse later on, I can say, click this little icon here for, again, showing the advanced functions. But within the vote history panel, I'm just going to save these results, and I'm just going to say my voter list. Now, anytime I want to open up that particular list, I go to Voters, I go to Favorites, and I select my voter list, and I get 3,319 voters.